thank you very much for making the time today. My name is Neil Mahapatra. I am one of the partners at an investment firm called Kingsley Capital Partners. And through Kingsley, we established the cannabinoid biotechnology company called Oxford Cannabinoid Technologies. We are pursuing a series of interesting research and drug development projects, one of which is with Professor James Edwards, who we are also very lucky to have with us today. James, thank you very, very much for making the time.
Thank you, Neil. Yes, it's a real privilege to be able to chat with you and to talk about this project and this exciting work that we're hoping to do with you guys. From my own side, I'm an associate professor here at the University of Oxford, and we have an interest in the researching aging and lifespan and longevity related mechanisms, but also looking at how aging related disorders develop and progress, and ways in which we might better treat them. And that fits exactly with what we hope to do with our cannabinoid research.
Great. Yeah, and I think that's probably a good time to sort of dive straight in and start talking about how we came across each other. And it's probably worth me starting by saying that, speaking to Oxford, my old university, was an absolute privilege, but it took some time, which I think is both a factor of it being an academic institution, and they nearly always do, but also a university with the reputation of Oxford, I think, has to think very deeply before moving into a field such as cannabinoid research. Before we move to James and how he sort of heard about us, it's worth saying that discussions with Oxford took about a year or over a year to progress to the stage that we signed an umbrella research agreement with the university into all things sort of cannabis and cannabinoid research, which we were very, very lucky to sign. That precipitated a series of professors, PIs, and discussions with them on various types of research projects. And before we talk about the specific research that we're doing, James, I'd love to hear how you came across us and at what stage you became aware of a company that was willing to fund cannabis research, and what you thought of it, actually.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting point, and you raised a number of really important issues there. And dealing with Oxford certainly is never straightforward, but it has the potential to open up a raft of resources and techniques and technologies that Oxford has, of course, and is very well used to applying. So our research was really focused on testing new agents which might stimulate aging and aging-related disorders and prevent age-related disease, as we'd said. And more recently, we'd been testing these naturally occurring products, such as polyamines and polyphenols, which we know can stimulate these lifespan and longevity-mediated effects. And within that, of course, it's quite a large group, and we've been working on a new metabolomic pathway which had the potential to be stimulated by endocannabinoids. So we tested a number of different endocannabinoids and shown quite a robust response. And it became really exciting that we could not only target bone cell activity as well as a number of other cells as well, but a number of these pain and neural networks were being triggered within this system as well. So what we really wanted to do was to try and develop this as a cannabis-based project, because it was obvious. There's a lot of historical evidence to suggest that this is going to work. But what we weren't able to do, even though we had a number of resources here at Oxford to support this, was to generate the funding to take this forward. So we had some great preclinical evidence to suggest that stimulation with endogenous cannabinoids was going to be important and would work. But when we tried to get this work funded through the normal channels, we came up against, I wouldn't say it was resistance, but it was reluctance to fund this work. And it's interesting that I also had the opportunity to talk to a number of patient advocates within some of these charities and research councils. And they were actually very positive about using cannabinoids and cannabis-based medicines to treat pain associated with musculoskeletal diseases and others. But to actually get the funding to do the research, that was another problem. So one of the things we're lucky to have at Oxford is a great business development office. So these are the guys who they seek out partnerships between what we're doing within the university itself and with interested companies who are trying to develop products or do similar sort of research and development. And it was through this scheme that we were able to come across Neil and KCP and the Oxford Cannabinoid Technologies, which was a great lifeline for us because we would never have been able to take this project forward if we weren't able to have these sorts of collaborations between academia and industry.
Very interesting. And so it wasn't quite late in the day that you actually came across us, because you get the sense that when you're speaking to the medical sciences and business development team, it takes some time before the actual PIs and the researchers that are doing all of the interesting work actually come across us. Is that how it worked?
I was working with the business development office on another project, which never actually took off. But it just so happened that in talking to them about some of the other things that we were looking at and we were trying to get funded, the prospect of doing cannabis and cannabis related work was mentioned. And then they said, oh, well, actually, we're in contact with a company that's wanting to take this forward. And that was great. So we leapt at the chance because, as I said, we'd been trying to do it for years previously. You know, we already had the proposals already lined up, and not that, but only that it was great that your interests aligned with our own as well. So we weren't able to just do it as a industry sponsored project. This is something that we've really been wanting to do for a while because there's such fantastic potential there.
Great. Well, it's worth talking about that. So you get the sense when, and let me know if you disagree, but you get the sense when you're looking at the cannabis and cannabis market that whilst there's plenty of retail going on, that there is a bit of a gap with regards to quality research into the medical power of cannabis and cannabinoids. I'd love to get your thoughts on that. Do you think there's a gap? If so, what are the types of indications where that gap can best be addressed, and where do you think the potential lies in cannabis and cannabinoids?
So that's really important. The truth is that the beneficial effects of cannabis and cannabinoids, they've really been screaming at humanity for centuries. So if you go back to ancient Egyptian texts, like the Ebers Papyrus, it talks about, this is from 1500 BC, by the way, it talks about cannabis as an anti-inflammatory. But it's only really in the past 5 or 10 years that the true clinical trials into the use of cannabis and cannabinoids as an anti-inflammatory have been done. There's about 150 registered clinical trials into the use of cannabis, cannabinoids, cannabidiol, or THC, or different variations. And it's actually quite a small number. I'd prefer it if it was a couple of hundred more. But the indications for cannabis and cannabinoids ranges from treating anxiety, insomnia, anorexia, improving vascular health and cognition, in replacing and complementing opioids in the treatment of chronic pain, musculoskeletal diseases, of course, and the pain associated with them, and of course cancer and cancer development and the nausea that's associated with chemotherapeutic drugs. And in fact, there was a really interesting study which showed, it speaks to our research as well, that patients who had been taking cannabis and cannabinoids because of the nausea associated with these chemotherapeutic drugs, actually showed an enhanced reduction in the tumor growth as well. So it has this indication that maybe treatment with cannabinoids might actually have direct effects on tumor growth as well. And this is something that hadn't really been thought about before, because people, of course, are only taking cannabis. It's not really allowed. They're taking it off-label, for want of a better word, because of this nausea and its effect as an antiemetic. Underlying all of this, we've got rafts of supporting data from preclinical studies as well. So not only prostate cancer, which is what that human trial was on that I was just referring to, but also mouse models of breast cancer, mouse models of melanoma have been shown to show beneficial effects in treatment with cannabis and CBD and THC derivatives. Pain is probably the biggest impact where cannabis and cannabis-related medicines is likely to have an effect, because that transcends a number of different disorders. And certainly in models of animal models of arthritis and musculoskeletal disease, treatment with CBDs have been shown to not only reduce pain and inflammation, but also improve nerve damage as well. So there's a vast opportunity there, and I think what's missing, the gap, is really the strong clinical trials that will provide the evidence for this and the confidence to take it forward. And what we're hoping to do is to provide more information in the mechanism that underlies a lot of this. So people already know about the CB1 and CB2, which are the main receptors for cannabis and cannabis-related products. But as more and more work is done, there's actually quite a few more signaling mechanisms that are being revealed through which cannabis and cannabis-related products are having their effects. And all this might well be quite transformative for how we do our research in the future and which diseases and disorders are targeted.
That's really interesting. I suppose a related question is, where is this research being done? Is the UK at the forefront of it? Is it behind? Is it a laggard? Is it somewhere in the middle? I said beyond Oxford, we've certainly come across a few other places now. For example, Imperial's doing some stuff. Roehampton, we also work with at OCT, but there doesn't seem to be that much research going on within the country. I'd love to get your thoughts.
Well, that's right. Well, and I think that's partly the problem that we'd run up against 5 years ago when we were trying to get this funded. And I put this down to a general reluctance and people not really wanted to be associated with the taboo or the stigma of doing cannabis and doing cannabis-related research. But and actually, this was the point that I put to the patient advocates as well. The funders don't necessarily want to support cannabis-related research. But how would you feel as patients, the people who are suffering? How would you feel about taking cannabis and cannabis-related medicines? And they don't care at all. They want anything that helps relieve their pain and makes their disease better. The truth is, there's hundreds of drugs on the market with worse side effects than cannabis and cannabis-related products. It just comes down to a stigma that's associated with a culture, smoking a joint, things which are generally associated as not what you would think of within the sphere of medical-related research. And it's a little bit disappointing because, you're right, the UK, it's got a great reputation for developing new medicines and treating disorders. Particularly here at Oxford, and the current emphasis on COVID-related research. Oxford was right there from the very beginning, and hope, and there's a lot of hope that we'll be able to deliver these vaccines to treat COVID. But when it came to cannabis research, it was a lot more difficult. But I'm really optimistic that we're turning a corner and we're seeing a thawing in attitudes. I think what's needed is more funding into these sorts of disorders and the potential for cannabis-related research, and not just in supporting clinical trials, but also in providing basic scientific research so that we can have a better understanding of what's actually going on a cellular and molecular level.
And do you think that will help legislators in the future? So the more research that's being done, I hope particularly in the UK that will help governments get more comfortable with progressing cannabis and cannabinoid legislation.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to confidence, and this is what we
Yeah.
talk about with building up the science base. So we want to build up the science base in cannabis-related research to provide confidence, not just to the legislators, but to the clinicians who might then be wanting to take these forwards into clinical trials. So in many ways, they would be looking to the cellular molecular biologists and people like me who do translational research to provide that preclinical evidence to say, we've got quite a lot of data here. We're not just talking about the historical evidence that cannabis might be good for this, that, or the other. We've got true scientific data that's been done robustly and unbiasedly, and shows that cannabis is going to have a beneficial effect, and stimulating not just that confidence in the trialists, in the legislators, as you said, but in the people to take that forward and to enroll in these trials as well. I think that it's an exciting time in UK research and for cannabis-related research, and with a little bit more support, I think we have great opportunities here to do some really exciting work.
Fascinating. Could we spend a little bit of time understanding the specific type of research that you're looking into with regards to cannabis and cannabinoids? And I know you spent a bit of time discussing what you do outside of it, but it would be useful to hear how that interplays with your wider field of research. It would just be great to hear about
absolutely.
that.
So, so as I mentioned, we're interested in not just in aging, but in aging-related disorders. And aging is probably the biggest risk factor for developing any form of cancer. And as I mentioned, of course, pain, it transcends a number of different disorders. So what we're trying to do is to try and understand the mechanisms that stimulate both cancer growth itself and metastasis within the skeleton, and how the metastasis and the growth of cancer within these bones leads to this devastating cancer-related pain. So our studies to start with had shown that if you stimulate with endocannabinoids, you're able to change the profile of cancer growth, and you're able to manipulate expression of certain pain-related signals within cell cultures and within animal models. Because we know that animal models that have tumors growing within their bones have an upregulation of a number of these different nerve receptors which stimulate these pain sensations. Of course, we also know that treatment with cannabis helps to dampen this. So there's an obvious connection there. Yeah. What we are wanting to do is to try and not just rely on these endogenous cannabinoids, which we know circulate and have a relatively limited effect, but we want to be able to try and be at the forefront of what's new in cannabis and cannabinoid related research. We want to be able to take the 150 odd cannabinoids that exist within a cannabis plant, refine them so that we know the good from the bad, essentially. We know which ones are psychoactive and that patients might not want. Maybe they do want, maybe they don't. But we know the ones which are anti-emetic, we know the ones which are anti-inflammatory, and we know the ones which are going to possibly reduce cancer growth as well. So we want to refine our targeting approach to some of these specifics. And the way in which we do that is to use a number of screening approaches, looking at a panel of different cancer cells to see that not only are they growing more or growing less, but their capacity to invade is less, and their capacity to metastasize and cause bone destruction once they get to the skeleton is less. And importantly, of course, their capacity to induce pain within that model system of cancer metastasis is reduced as well.
And I think the ability to alleviate pain, which is one of the key focuses of OCT, is something that really does need to be explored much further. And as I think we all know, that there's lots of different types of pain. James, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're also very focused in sort of pain caused by metastases. And I do think, personally speaking, that much more research needs to be done into that. A quick question on kind of the minor cannabinoids, because I think lots is known, well, not lots, but an increasing amount is known about the major, more well-known cannabinoids, and there's more research. Not, I wouldn't say a huge volume being done, but certainly more research is being done each day on those. But how much potential do you think lies in the long tail of the other 140 cannabinoids? Is enough known about them yet?
Well, this is it. This is both the beauty and the frustration of this sort of research, because we don't know. It's like the unknown unknown, the known unknowns in this instance. We know that there's potential there. We know that they're there, but we don't have a really good idea of what they do. I think what's important to accept is that, a lot of these cannabinoids are part of a long metabolic chain where one cannabinoid is turned into another, which is turned into another and turned into another. So some of these 140, 150 might only exist under certain physiological conditions. They might only exist for a very small amount of time before they're then catalyzed into something else. But nevertheless, they give us, a great basis upon which new treatments might be developed, and a little insight into targets that we might be able to pick out and test in our model systems.
Fascinating. Well, yes, I think both time and heat can change. Absolutely, can evolve one cannabinoid into another, and I think there's more research that needs to be done.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? That's what we always come back to. There's more research to be done, and I think that's the key point here. And I think these industry academia partnerships are very common these days, across international research, and it's a great way to take these sorts of projects forward, because it's, like I said, it's in the best interests of both of us. Yeah,
I suppose my final question is in your if you had a wish list of something that could be altered in the UK to improve the research environment for cannabis and cannabinoids, what would it be?
Well, what we've been trying to encourage is specific calls. So priority areas are assigned within MRC, BBSRC, or within certain charities as well, as to particular areas of focus. And some of the charities that we've been really well supported by over the years, such as Versus Arthritis, have been interested in pain and the treatment of pain, but haven't really been willing to support cannabis-related research. So what I'd really like to see coming out of some of the Research Council efforts is perhaps a call, or at least, if not a specific call, for funding in this particular area of cannabis-related research, but a capacity to start building more networks. There's a lot of people in and around the UK who are doing similar types of research. And, like I said, we've already got the historical evidence that there's going to be something there, and we don't really want to waste time. Enough time has been wasted already in not doing cannabis-related research over the past couple of 100 years. So let's not waste time on it. Let's try and develop a strong network of both academic and industry-related researchers, and hopefully with input from Research Council fundings as well, that we can develop some strong programs that'll move us forward a lot more swiftly than we're currently doing.
I'd agree, and it's worth remembering that one of the leading lights, GW Pharma, was a UK business. So we were, and I suppose from a very early stage, one of the leading research countries into the space, and I very much hope we will be again, and I feel that we can be.
Yeah. Well, I do too. I have every confidence.
Great. James, thank you very, very much for your time.
No problem at all, Neil. It's great to chat.